So it's a little different for me to give this presentation. This is not going to be about research. This is about applying to graduate school, and it's a presentation that my grad students really helped me put together to give to students that are in our lab and are typically juniors and seniors and starting to think about going to grad school. After that, I started giving it to students in our psychology capstone senior thesis class for that same reason. So Emily saw it in that class and thought this would be a good opportunity for honor students. Now, having said that, I'm not a professional academic advisor, although I guess advising is part of all faculty's job description. So my opinions are my own. They might not reflect what a professional advisor might tell you. But I can tell you from the point of view of a faculty member searching for graduate students and looking through graduate applications, these are the kinds of things that I look for. So it's going to be most helpful for students that are applying to graduate schools in particular. So I'm going to talk about three things today. I'm going to talk about creating your CV and updating your CV. And then we're going to talk about personal statements and applying to graduate schools. And then finally, are we ending at 7-ish?
Yeah.
Okay. If there's time, I want to walk you through a PhD advisor guide and talk to you about the kinds of questions that you want to ask of a potential advisor and that potential advisor's current graduate students. So let's start with CVs. So here's how we're going to organize this. We're going to talk about what a CV is, types of CVs, what should be included. I'm going to give you an example of a good CV and a bad CV, and then some general tips. So if we talk about what a CV is, this is a living document that you're going to keep updating. It is a story of your academic achievements. So it really is your curriculum life. So it should include your credentials. It should include your accomplishments. Certainly where you've gone to school and your GPA. Usually this is going to be used when you apply to graduate schools. So it's not the same thing as a resume. So a resume and a CV are slightly different. Resume typically is limited to 1 to 2 pages. Your CV, now at this stage in your career, probably is still only going to be about 2 pages, but it continues to grow. So by the time you're a graduate student, you're just going to keep that same CV, but just keep updating it. And if and when you eventually get a job in academia as a faculty position, you would keep updating that CV until it grows up to 50 pages. Your resume is more of a professional identity. Your CV is more about your scholarly activity, or your scholarly identity, I should say. What are some of the skills that you've learned during your time in school? What are the activities you've done, your academic activities? What awards have you gotten for academia? So if you keep that in mind, this is all relevant to academia, that will help you. The two presentations that I'm giving you, the one on CVs and the one on personal statements, I've emailed to Emily, so she'll upload those to the folder so that you can all have these as well. Okay. So you should be looking to create, if you haven't already, or update your CV. Every time you get a new accomplishment, first thing you should do is add that to your CV. Whether that's an award from your department, or whether it's getting on the dean's list, or whether you've made a presentation like at the undergraduate research conference at the end of the year, or a 3-minute thesis, or any of those kinds of things. You should update it right away to your CV so you don't forget. The largest concern with CVs is that a lot of people just haven't added things that are relevant. So at the undergraduate level, it's people that are finishing school, you're going to emphasize some of your transferable skills, qualities, and abilities. What have you learned? What skills have you picked up? And it really depends on your major. At the very least, you've all mastered Microsoft Office. I don't think you can graduate without mastering Microsoft Office. Right? Some of you might have mastered programming languages, especially if you're in computer science. Some of you might have mastered statistical software, like R or SPSS, or one of those. Some of you might have mastered experimental software, how to program experiments. At the graduate level, it's more about research and academic experience and professional training. And then at the academic level, professors, research, academics, it's more, you include career advancement, career achievements, grants, things like that. Now, even as an undergrad, you might have some of these things. You might have some research publications already. You might have research presentations. You would certainly include those. You might have gotten grants for your academic success. Certainly include that. So, what should be included? Here are all the things that go into a typical CV. Your name at the top, your professional contact info, research interests, education, any publications or research experience. That includes any labs, research labs that you've worked in. Any presentations you've given, whether sometimes even in classes. So if you have a senior thesis type class, a capstone class, you might give a presentation at the end of the year. You can include that on your CV. Related work experience. Notice I said related work experience. So looking at Baskin-Robbins ice cream does not, yes, it would go on your resume, it would not go on your CV. Funding, any funding you've gotten, any awards and achievements, any academic involvement, so any groups or clubs or honor societies that you're in. Look in, with your major, look into that major and see if they have an honor society. Sometimes that has a chapter at MSU. Some honor societies don't have chapters, but that doesn't mean you can't be in them. So if you Google honor society in whatever major you're in, you can find that out. And it looks really good on your CV. When I was an undergraduate, my very last semester, I joined the Honor Society of Psychology just so I could put that on my CV for when I applied to graduate schools. Any skills that you've acquired, I've already mentioned some of those. And then you could put references at the end of your CV, or you could say references are available upon request. So let me give you an example of a good and a bad CV. So I want you to look through these if you can. I don't know if you can read this, but this is clearly indicated as a bad CV example. Can you read that? What if I could zoom in? There's the top part. Can you read it now? So we have his name, Mark Taylor, his address, telephone number, email, coolguy007@hotmail, date of birth, all these things, single. I'm a hardworking individual who enjoys working. I am excellent at meeting deadlines. I have 2 years of experience in business, and I would like to contribute to a business by excellent skills and vast work experience. Achievements: finished my college studies, currently working as an IT support assistant. So what are some issues that you see with this? Yeah, and a lot of times this does come up. I'll have students who send me an email with something hot. So make sure it's a professional email. Use your MSU address, or at the very least a Gmail that doesn't have a name like cool guy. What else? Yeah, if you're gonna, under education, you're gonna put where you're getting your bachelor's degree. And if you put that there, we already know that you finished your college studies. And that currently working as an IT support assistant, if that's an achievement, okay, but you haven't really accomplished anything. You're just simply working. What about this?
It's vague.
It's very vague. Hardworking individual who enjoys working. There's not really any tangible evidence of anything here. Finally, we don't need to know that you're single. Let's go down. All right, so here is education. 1991 to 1992, Collingham, something nursery. Stanford primary school, something secondary school. So we don't need to know about your elementary school or your secondary school. We really only need to know from college on. If you did junior college, that's great. English, A, mathematics, etc. We don't need this, just your overall GPA. And maybe include, if you want, your overall GPA and then the GPA in your major. That's helpful as well. Because from the point of view of somebody who's selecting a student, I want to know how well you did overall, but I especially want to know how you did on the relevant classes. Let's go to the next one. Employment. IT support assistant, IT admin, IT assistant. Qualifications: bachelor's in psychology. Skills: excellent communication skills, excellent management skills, great IT skills. So what are some issues with this stuff?
The work is kind of all over the place, and you said
Right. So really not relevant for academia. Doesn't need to include all that stuff. What else?
skills. You didn't really use any action verbs. It's all very general.
Very general and vague. Right? There's no real evidence of this. No concrete examples. And then qualifications, I guess the only qualification is you graduated. And then finally, we get down to bottom, hobbies and interests. I enjoy skiing, hiking, playing football, going to the gym, eating out with my friends, bird watching, and going to church on Sundays. References Mr. Evan at Tesco. So what are some problems with these?
Do you even need hobbies and interests?
You really don't. If any advisor is going to select you because of your hobbies and interests, then you probably don't want to be working with that person anyway. You're not going to graduate school to find a bird watching buddy. And then here, make sure that your references are academics and professionals, which we'll get to. So what makes this a bad CV? Well, At first glance, the CV is generic, dull, and boring. It's poorly written and badly structured. There's a lot of vague statements in there. There's no real-world examples. There's not really anything tangible in this. Too much irrelevant and outdated information. And font is inappropriate and difficult to read. In fact, I had to really zoom in to be able to read that because it's kind of like a handwriting font. So if you stick to Times New Roman or Arial or one of those, then it will look a lot better. So let's look at what a good CV would look like. Notice it's still 2 pages, but it's organized really well. And each section is pretty clear. So let me zoom in on these sections. Okay, so more of a professional email. We don't have a lot of extra information. We don't about his marital status or anything like that. Okay, personal profile statement. Motivated, adaptable, and responsible computing graduate seeking a position in an seeking an IT position which will utilize the professional and technical skills developed through past work experiences in this field. I have a methodical, customer-focused approach to work and strong drive to see things through to completion. In my current job, I have managed the launch and migration of 2 major IT systems, which was completed on time and within budget. And within the IT world, that sounds important. Achievements. Implementing major systems with 0 downtime and 0, I'm guessing that's a data loss. Employee of the month for 2 consecutive months, member of the British Computing Society. Education, let's go down here. Okay, so things are done in order from most recent to earliest, starting with the bachelor's in computer science, Ashton University, first class degree with professional placement, and then relevant modules. So these are things that people within IT would like to see. So think about that. If you're going to highlight something other than just your GPA, highlight what you think is going to be really important for that particular position or that particular school. National Diploma in IT, triple distinction, secondary school. This is, I think, in employment. So, most recent first, IT manager. Notice he's not just listing where he was employed. He's talking about the things that he did that are relevant at that job. Mentoring and training new IT staff. Researching, installing, and configuring a new computer system. Ensuring that all relevant licensing laws are adhered to. So think about that when you're writing, when you're doing employment. What are your responsibilities at that job that are relevant? Because these are transferable skills once you get to grad school. These are things that a grad school faculty advisor is going to be looking for. Okay, IT support officer provided extensive IT support to internal, external stakeholders, etc. So for each of these, this person's listing specific responsibilities that they had at that job that are relevant. Qualifications, level 3, I don't know what this means, but presumably the employer would, or the grad school would, and then certifications. Now let's look at skills. Excellent knowledge of a variety of programming languages, including Java, Python, C, JavaScript, something, and SQL. So very specific about software and programming languages that this person is skilled with. Strong troubleshooting skills with software, hardware, and network product. Expert in networking, fault diagnostics, and troubleshooting. Cisco routers, Cisco switching, configuration technologies. So this person does do hobbies, so that's fine, but you don't need to. And then references, here's an IT executive, here's a senior IT analyst. So these are the kinds of people this student would want to put as references. So what makes it good? Has a good format and layout, easy to read, so it has a good font. Bullet points and short sentences, fully tailored to the job that candidate is applying for. Minimal amount of color and design, so you don't want something that jumps all over the place with lots of different colors. Notice just the lines here are orange, everything else is pretty clear. All the information a standard CV should contain, same format for dates. I'm going to show you a couple of CVs from students who have applied to work with me as soon as I get done with this. Okay. In terms of writing tips, use short sentences and bullet points. Don't put in paragraphs in your CV unless it's like that very first one that just talks about your interests. Select an appropriate font, like Times New Roman or Arial. Use CV templates and examples. There's lots of these online. If you just Google CV templates, you can see that. That's what I did. Have someone proofread your CV for typos, and then tailor to a specific job or a specific academic program. Okay, what can you do now to add to your CV? You can get involved in a research lab. Is anybody here in a research lab? So whatever your major is, if they have a research lab, and get involved and start working with the faculty member. That looks really good on your CV. That also leads to potential options for presenting your work. Like I said, there's the undergraduate research celebration every semester. There's University Scholars Program where students can apply to do research, and they will actually pay you to do the research. That looks great on your CV. Find ways to gain new skills. So learn how to use different programs, Excel, SPSS, R, ePrime, etc. Apply for work-related jobs or internships while you're here. You can join clubs. There's all kinds of campus clubs and groups that you can join. All of those will also look good on your CV, especially if you're in a leadership position in one of those clubs. There's a lot of turnover in the leadership positions for these clubs. Every year, half the people in the club graduate. And then they're looking for who's going to take it over next year. So that those leadership opportunities will be really good on your CV as well. Getting involved in the community, there's all kinds of opportunities to volunteer in the community as well. And then apply for awards, departmental awards, university awards. Within the Department of Psychology, we have an outstanding undergraduate award that we give every year. Typically, we only have 3 or 4 people apply. We have over 600 majors. So there's lots of people that are missing out on this opportunity. Here's just a couple helpful websites. But like I said, you could just Google curriculum vita and lots of options will come out. Okay. Let me quickly show you a couple from students that have applied to work with me. And I'll start with my current grad student who's actually now working on her dissertation. She was getting her master's when she sent this to me, Audrey Hood. So at the time she had a bachelor's. She gave a summary of her research interests, So just a one-paragraph summary of the research that she's interested in doing and has been doing. Then she has her education, starting with the master's at the top, anticipated 2017, bachelor's, and then her associate's degree. Then she goes into research experience. These are the labs that she worked in. Her advisor, what topics she researched, working memory and the impacts of stress, mind wandering, affect, mindfulness, meditation, thought suppression, tasks, collection of data, coding of data, data entry, supervision of undergraduate research assistants, organizing lab meetings, gained experience in ePrime, Media Lab, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, and SPSS. So she's talking about not only did she list the lab that she's in, but she listed what she did in that lab and the skills that she gained in that lab. So make sure that you do that if you're working in a lab, or if you're working anywhere on campus, or if you're working as a tutor, or in a writing center, or anything like that. So she had one publication, so she listed that under peer-reviewed manuscripts. She had another publication that was under review, and then she had other ones that were in progress. These are presentations that she gave at conferences. One is an international one, another one was at her university. So this was the annual undergraduate student symposium. Like I said, we have those here. So if you're doing research, you really should consider presenting at that. Academic experience as a teaching assistant, lectures and presentations she gave at various classes, awards and grants, so she got some travel grants. That's the other thing, if you're doing research in a lab and you're working on a project you want to present it at a conference, a lot of times departments will pay for your travel to present, or at least supplement your travel to present. And then that looks great under awards as well. Dean's List, President's Tuition, Scholarship, Travel, and Travel Grants. Honors, Academic Society, Psi Chi, Alpha Chi, Tau Sigma. Volunteer experience, professional organizations, and then she has references available on the list. Now, she did a lot, but she was a master's student, so she had more time to do all that stuff than all of you have. So here's a CV from my current first-year student. And so he, at the time, was just about to get his master's. So he applied last year, Arizona State. And so he had two different bachelors. The most recent was psychology, but back in 2009, he actually got a bachelor's in business administration. He lists his GPA and his accomplishments. GPA is much higher for his most recent degree than for his earlier. All I care about is his most recent degree. Teaching experience, he was a teaching assistant. Lab experience, same thing. He says not only what lab he was in, but all the things that he did in that lab. And then as a volunteer, part of the Clean the World Foundation, Homeless Alliance, memberships, and then references. And obviously both of those worked because I ended up selecting both of them to come down and see if it would be in my lab. Any questions about CVs before I move on to personal statements? Has anyone started your CV yet? So my advice would be get started tonight. So go home and get started, even if it's something, just very vague and just getting it started is important, because then you can just always go in and update it whenever you can. The other thing, which I'm going to talk about in a second, when you apply to graduate schools and jobs, you're going to need to provide references. And so you're going to have people that are willing to write you a letter of recommendation. So not only do you have to provide that CV to the school that you're applying to, but you should give it to the person writing the letter of recommendation as well. Okay, so let's talk about personal statements. So the next thing you need to do after creating your CV, anybody applying for graduate schools this coming year? Applying in the fall? A couple people. Okay. So a lot of grad school applications are due in the fall. So December, or even November. So look, when you're researching graduate schools, make sure first thing you do is look and see when their application deadlines are and what exactly needs to be a part of the application. So for personal statements, I'm going to try to explain this from the point of view of somebody who reads personal statements and reads applications, the kinds of things I'm looking for a graduate student. So the purpose of the personal statement is to sell yourself as a graduate school applicant. You want to emphasize your personal strengths and skills and what you bring to the table. I had Emily upload a article on applying to graduate school and kisses of death of graduate school applications. So it's really a good article to read. The authors solicited advice from something like 400 something school administrators that were accepting graduate students, and asked them what are the kinds of things that will kill an application. So I'm going to try to highlight some of that here, and in addition, the good parts of a personal statement, what should go into it. From the point of view of a faculty, the ideal student, seen through the eyes of graduate faculty, is gifted and creative, very bright and extremely motivated to learn, perfectly suited to the program, eager to pursue the lines of inquiry valued by the faculty, pleasant, responsible, and devoid of serious personal problems. And I think this really sums it up. Your graduate application needs to convey all of this. Not all of this is going to come from you. Some of this is going to come from people who write you letters of recommendation. Especially these kinds of things. It's up to you to show that you're perfectly suited to the program, that you're eager to pursue the lines of inquiry valued by that faculty member or members, and that you're motivated to learn. That's up to you. Your letter writers will talk about your personality. What should be included? Well, look at what the grad school asks for. The grad school is going to ask you to submit a personal statement. Sometimes it might be just that. It might just say submit a personal statement. More often it'll say submit a personal statement that specifically addresses this, this, and this. So make sure in your personal statement you address those things. 3 major components of a personal statement: why you're interested in the program, and that particular faculty advisor. So a lot of graduate programs, not only are you applying to the program, but you're going to be assigned a faculty advisor or a mentor. And so you want to say in your personal statement, why do you want to go to this program? And why do you want to work with this faculty your strengths, which includes personality traits, experience, and skills. Relevant strengths. How your strengths benefit the program and the faculty advisory. How are you going to be a good fit to this program and working with this particular person? Incorporate both your short-term and your long-term goals. The long-term goal is to become a researcher and faculty member and open up my own lab and do this, this, and this. My short-term goal is to get my PhD in this field, which will allow me to do that. Or my long-term goal is to become a professional counselor. My short-term goal is to get a master's in counseling, which will allow me to do this. Sell yourself. This is not the time to be modest. Like I said, the biggest problem is people leave things out that are important. Address any issues you might foresee with your application. Did you have a large gap in between your associate's degree and your bachelor's degree? Is your GPA lower than you think really reflects your abilities? Maybe your first year or two in college, you weren't sure what you wanted to do. And then once you figured that out, you've had a 4.0 ever since. That would be important to list in your personal statement, to describe that. That this class, this major really sparked my interest and my passion. And ever since I've gotten straight A's in all my classes. Because this is what I want to do. Somebody reads that, they're going to see, they'll see your transcript and they'll see that your last 2 years you had a 4.0, even though your first 2 years you might have averaged a 2.6. Don't go, if they give you page limits, don't go over. Don't talk about stories without providing the lessons that you learned. Don't talk about the lessons without giving concrete examples. And if you name a quality about yourself, give concrete examples. So don't just say you're a good communicator. Give examples. Don't just say you're resilient. Give examples. Don't just say you're good at troubleshooting. Give examples. Concrete examples. Organization. The most common is that people will just go chronologically. I did this, then I did this, then I did that. That's not really ideal. It's not necessarily bad, and for some, it might fit okay. You could instead organize it based on these three components that I just mentioned. You could organize your personal statement by starting off with why you're interested in the program and that particular faculty. Then talk about your experience, traits, and skills. Then talk about the fit between those skills and the program, what you want to get out of that program. And make sure to put your strengths on display. Most of us reading these, we're pretty busy. And we're looking through these and we want to see as quickly as possible what experience does this person have? And why do they want to come here and why do they want to work with me? That's what really needs to come out in your personal statement. Not a two-page story about your background growing up in Nebraska. A thesis statement helps, especially because the faculty are usually kind of busy, but you don't necessarily need one if you don't want to. But if you do have one, essentially it should have this kind of message, accept me because. I'm not saying use this, don't use that literal language, but just convey that message in your thesis statement. Your introduction, forecast what plan what you plan to emphasize with the thesis statement if you do. You could provide a story, just keep it brief if you do. Talk about your interest in the field. In your conclusion, emphasize, or I should say re-emphasize, your fit with the program. Reiterate who you might want to work with and why. If the program or potential advisor mentions specific qualities that they look for in candidates, make sure and emphasize this throughout your personal statement, but connect back to it in the conclusion. All right, I'm going to give you some examples of good and bad ones. Here's an example of a bad personal statement. I considered myself to that of a pack of wolves, each wolf a characteristic of my own, whether it was my past, present, future, or yet divided I was. There was no leader for the pack, but luckily this past summer I went to this program in Oxford called the Oxford Tradition that truly changed my life. I studied their politics and economics, and through that I learned where my future lies. In an instant I knew that I can help people with what I could learn in the future, and it is the future that I must change for the better, of course. That's not going to get you accepted. So what's a problem with that? There's somewhat a problem for any of them.
Grammar.
So the grammar's awful. There's some spelling errors. What else?
It doesn't really say much.
Yeah. The broader issue is it didn't really address what the personal statement should address. Why you're interested in that program, how your strengths and experience and how that is relevant for that program, and who you want to work with in that program, and why you think it's a good fit. So this one, through my undergraduate research projects, I have explored the relationship between biomedical research and patient care. My curiosity with how cells function, combined with my desire to be academically challenged, have led me to devote a notable amount of my college career to research. Since my freshman year, I have conducted 2 independent research projects, which I had the opportunity to present at 2 school symposiums as well as a national meeting. One of my research projects examined defects in the iron uptake process of Belgrade rats. Pinpointing the cause of these defects will increase the possibility of manufacturing drugs that could help humans with iron deficiency diseases. In the long run, I hope to take advantage of my research background to develop projects that would have practical applications to patient care. So, this is a much better section of a personal statement. This could not possibly be the full personal statement, or else that would be incomplete. Because it's missing why this person wants to go to this particular school and work with this particular faculty. But it does a great job of indicating that person's experience and what they want to do in general. Also has that, their long-term goal as well. Okay, this is the article that I was talking about that's uploaded to that website that Emily provided you. And I'm just going to walk you through this. Damaging personal statements. So of all those people that were surveyed, they said one of the main kisses of death for an application are personal statements that talk about their mental health. For a long time, I've struggled with depression, and I want to learn more about this. That puts up a red flag. It's great that you want to do that, but from a faculty advisor, do they want to put a 6 to 10 year investment in you if they're worried that you're going to quit the program? So you got to keep thinking about, this is the faculty advisor reading this, or potential faculty advisor reading this, and they're not going to want to see any red flags. grad school, I love this quote, grad school is not a treatment for personal problems. It's just gonna, trust me, it's gonna make it worse. If you already struggle, grad school's not gonna make it easier for you. So the grad school faculty are already gonna be worried that you're gonna make it through the program. Don't give them any red flags that make them worry even more. Excessive altruism. So seeing the thing about how you want to help people, we kind of assume everybody wants to help people. So that's not really going to benefit you. Focus on your professional activities and your interests. Don't worry so much about your personal qualities. Let your letter writers talk about that. Your letter writers will talk about your personal qualities. Don't include things that are professionally inappropriate. So excessive self-disclosure, you don't need to do. Excessive or inappropriate humor, you don't need to have in your personal statement. Religious references, some people put in there about their relationship to God and how, now, if you're applying to a theological program, great. If you're not, there's nothing wrong with it, except it's not relevant to your grad school career. Harmful letters of recommendation. What is a harmful letter of recommendation? Well, certainly if the person you get to write a letter of recommendation says something negative about you, that's harmful. But the lack of positive statements can also be harmful. If it's just a generic letter, and it's obvious this is just a generic letter, so it's obvious that they didn't really know you that well, that ends up harming your application. When you go to ask somebody for a letter of recommendation, I suggest don't just ask, can you write me a letter of recommendation? Ask, can you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Because if they can't, they could probably tell you right then and there. And then you're better off asking somebody else. It's not going to do you any favors to have a generic letter that doesn't say anything positive about you. Similarly, if they say something like, they need a lot of guidance. To me, that's a huge red flag. If I saw that, I would not take that person. As a faculty advisor or potential mentor, you want someone who has a lot of intrinsic motivation. So I don't need to keep on them to get their work done. And the ability to work independent. They don't need me to hold their hand every day. Choose relevant sources. Choose somebody who can comment on your academic performance. So maybe a teacher that you did really well in their class, and they got to know you pretty well, especially if you had a writing sample in that class. Somebody you did research with or a project with. So somebody whose lab you worked in, who can talk about you in terms of your research or artistic or project skills. And then potentially somebody who you did your field work with or volunteer or internship with. You can talk about all those experiences and all those qualities about responsibility and motivation, more job type related qualities. But don't just get 3 people that all talk about your classwork. That's not going to help you. They're already going to have your transcripts, so they already know how you did. They don't need 3 people to talk about your coursework. You really want people to talk more about your research or your art or whatever major you're in, your experience. Give your recommendation letter writers your personal statement so they can see what you're interested in. They can tailor their letter to make sure it fits with your interests. Tell them the courses you've taken with them, including what semester and what grade you got. I hate having to search the person, search my documents on my computer to figure out, okay, what class did this person take? And then I gotta figure out what grade they got, and then what grade did they get on the writing assignment, and all that. Include your CV, so the letter writer can see everything you've done. So if you worked in this person's lab, they might not know about your volunteer experience. They might not know about your overall GPA. So if you give all three of your letter writers your CV, they'll know all that stuff, and they can comment on it and talk about how rare that is to have all these qualities or to do all these things on the side, and how that demonstrates your passion for whatever career you're going for. Other issues. Program fit. This is so critical. It usually costs about $50 or more to apply to a school. I can't tell you how many applications I've looked at where the student didn't even know what kind of program we had. They thought we were a clinical psychology program rather than a research psychology program. And that's just a wasted $50 because we're not even going to look at their application. Fit is crucial for both the professor and the student. Research your potential advisor. A lot of applications will say, which faculty member would you like to work with if you're accepted? Research the faculty and figure out who you would want to work with, and actually read one or two of their publications. This will allow you to address this in your personal statement. So-and-so's work on whatever is, I'm especially interested in so-and-so's work on this and that. These are the things that interest me about it. And this is what I want, this is why I would like to work with him or her. I'm looking for someone who specifically wants to come and work with me. Why do they want to work with me? And then I want to ask, would they be happy here? Can I help them towards their career? I don't want to get somebody in my lab who's not going to be happy. And we don't want to admit anyone to our program who's not going to be happy. So we want to make sure that there's a good fit between that person's interests and long-term goals and what our program can provide and what I can provide as a faculty member. Talk about what that faculty member does and what their research is and what is it about their research that you're interested in and why you would want to work with that person and what kinds of topics. And this is where I want to be clear. General topics, general areas of research that person does. I'm really interested in attention and memory and people's ability to control attention and avoid mind wandering and distraction. That's why I want to work with Dr. Hutchison, etc. Don't outline a specific research proposal that you have and say, this is the experiment I want to do. Because what if that's not the experiment I want to do? I don't want someone to come here and tell me what they're going to do. I want someone to come here and say, I want to learn from you in these areas, and I want to conduct research in these areas. We'll figure it out together once you get here, what kinds of experiments we want. Poor writing skills. Make sure your personal statement is organized, coherent, concise, and have people proofread it. I would start off with an outline. I would do this for all the papers you write, just by the way. But start off with an outline, make sure it's organized. Misfired attempts to impress. Some people would say things like they badmouth their previous mentor. I'd like to work with you. You're way more qualified than my past mentor. or my past school was not very prestigious and they didn't help me. It really comes off like you're somebody who doesn't take responsibility for your failures and tries to blame everybody else. Avoid name dropping of famous relatives or colleagues or anything like Okay. The last thing I want to tell you about is actually in this other thing that I gave to Emily. And it's a really good, okay, so by this time you've submitted your application, you've submitted your personal statement and your CV. The next step in the last 5 minutes, you get an interview to a job or to a graduate school. So a couple things to remember. The most important thing to remember when you go on an interview to a graduate school is that most likely they already want you. They bring you out for an interview, that means you've made their short list and it means you're probably already in. Now, what that means is that you need to take off your applicant hat and your interviewee hat and put on your interviewer hat. Now you are interviewing them. You already know they want you. They brought you out. Now you're interviewing them. And the reason this is the most important piece of advice I can give you is that if you're thinking like they're interviewing you, it's going to stop you from asking the critical questions you need to ask to decide if this is the place you want to go to. So remember, you're interviewing them at that point. So you're going to want to know, what kind of stipend do you provide to graduate students? How often do you publish with your graduate students? Do the faculty and the grad students get along? Can I talk to some of your current graduate students? Notice how if you're worried about being interviewed, you might be scared to ask some of these questions. But you need to ask these questions. This guide is great. It talks about whom you should ask. So when is it better to ask? To just search their website publications, directly observe, ask the department, ask their current students, candidly, or in other students in the program. And so it's all color-coded. So let me start from the left here. And zoom in. All right, so on the left-hand side, read a few of their recent paper abstracts, checked out their website before you meet with them, so you have a basic background of what they do. When I applied to grad school, this was a long time ago, it was before cell phones. So I had a landline phone, I had a list of all the programs, all the people I applied to work with, and a brief statement of what they did, what their research was on, next to the phone. So I got a call, and they said, oh, just out of the blue, they would just call you out of the blue and say, yeah, I'm so-and-so from this university. Do you have a second to chat? And I'd say, sure, 1 second. And I'd find them on my piece of paper and what they did. And I'd say, yes, I'm really interested in this, this, and this. Now, chances are nowadays you won't be put on the spot like that. You'll get an email first. But when you get that email, do some background reading. Who do you want to work with? The number one thing that determines your happiness in graduate school is who your faculty advisor is. You could have a wonderful program, but a horrible faculty that you're working with. Tries to get you to wash their car or babysit their kids or something like that. You want to make sure, so the number one thing you want to do is, if you get a chance, ask if you can talk to their current students. If grad students aren't happy, they can't wait to tell the world what they're not happy about. So if the grad students tell you that they're happy, then you can trust them. Grad students are going to tell you what it's honestly like working with this person. All right. How does the funding work? Money is, important, especially for a place like Bozeman. It's hard to live in a place like Bozeman. So is the stipend large enough to be able to afford to live in Bozeman or wherever you go? How easy is it to work with multiple faculty? So some departments are very collaborative and they like you to work with multiple faculty, and the faculty get along, they have joint projects. Others, the faculty, if they don't get along, sometimes they say, you're just working with me, and they're very possessive. What's the culture like? And then, so if we go over here, here's all the color coding. So this tells you who to ask. So let's start here. What are the expectations and the style? Does the professor have tenure yet? That may be a good thing or a bad thing. What have previous lab members done after they got their PhD or their master's? What's the structure like? How collaborative is it? Does the advisor consider themselves a hands-on or hands-off advisor? I would consider myself a hands-off advisor. I don't like to have to constantly hold my grad students' hands. How does the advisor give feedback on papers, et cetera? What's their style? And so it's color-coded. Some of these things you can ask their grad students. Some of these things you can figure out from the website. Some of the things you can ask the professor themselves. Research fit and projects. What research methods does the lab use? What are some of the current projects? How much freedom do you think I'd have in selecting my own projects, etc. Or you could just ask, how do your grad students typically come up with projects? What are the funding? Where does funding come from? What are constraints on funding sources? Do they help pay for travel if you travel to present at conferences? What kind of travel funding do they provide? Advisor fit. Oh, here's another thing. Before you apply, contact the faculty advisor ahead of time. Say, are you taking students next year? Because if that's the person you're applying to the program for, and they're not taking students, don't waste your $50 on an application. So, are you taking students next year? And then when you apply, like I said in the personal statement, make sure to call out that faculty advisor. Now, the good thing is, if you start communicating with a faculty member ahead of time, they'll already know to look for your application when it comes in. And when your application comes in, they'll say, oh yeah, this is the person who emailed me and is genuinely interested in working in my lab. We want students who really want to work in our lab. And we're human. We're human. Who would I be to prevent this student from the opportunity to work with me? What kind of monster would keep that happening? We don't think about the fact that you've probably tailored that to everyone. No, we're egotistical enough to think that you really are solely working with me, wanting to work with me. How could I possibly keep you from that? So that is really important. Don't be scared to start a communication with a potential advisor ahead of time. Do it before you apply. I can't tell you how strong, how much of an impact that makes. Because we're potentially investing 6 years in you. So we want someone who really wants to be here and really wants to work with us. And then lab culture, a lot of this you would ask the current grad students. How often do grad students attend conferences? Do students mostly work with senior students or directly with the professor? Are there lab outings and events? Are there snacks in the lab? I guess this is important, I don't know. I've started providing that because one of my grad students was complaining that they never have snacks in the lab. Do students have their own offices? Do they work together in a combined, is there a window in the office? It might not be life or death, but these are all important questions. When I was applying to graduate schools, I was choosing between two different advisors. One was in my home state, the other one was all the way across the country. The one in my home state, the grad students, they weren't happy. And I had heard some negative things about it. And even things like how grad students washing her. Those examples came to mind, washing her car and babysitting her kids. That are completely inappropriate. And I thought, I'm motivated enough that I can make it work with this person. But given the choice, why would I choose that as opposed to this other advisor with the grad students who were just raving about it? Okay. As I said before, so try to imagine yourself as a faculty member choosing a student. What are the kinds of things that you would pick, and what would be a red flag? Right? Worst thing would be getting a student who quits. We don't want to invest all that time in somebody who doesn't finish the program. So anything that would be a hint of somebody dropping out is going to be a huge red flag for us. We want to know. We want you to be delighted that you're in this program and delighted that you're working with me. Because I don't want you to be here and then be unhappy. You come in, I'm not helping you out in that case, and you're not helping me out. It's a mutual relationship. It's beneficial for both of us. I have a grad student who's really good, and it makes my job a lot more enjoyable. And I get more publications out of it too. It benefits me too. Okay, with that, we'll take questions. Yeah.
When you give someone your CV and personal statement, is that before or after they agree to giving you a strong recommendation?
After.
After.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they should know you well enough to know whether they can give you a strong recommendation. If they have to look through your CV and transcript to know that you're good, then they don't know you well enough. Any other ideas or questions?
How important is your GPA?
So it really depends on the graduate program. That's a great question. So for me, I would rather someone with a 3.3 who has experience doing research in an area similar to mine than someone with a 4.0 who doesn't have that experience. So for me, research experience is more important than the GPA. And GPAs, it depends. Some schools are easier than others. And what I found is being a great student doesn't necessarily make you a great PhD student. So being a great undergraduate. One of the hardest things of going into a doctoral program is it's a big leap going from undergraduate to doctoral. And at the undergraduate level, you're so focused on GPA and getting A's in your classes. And you get to your PhD, and advisors will tell you, I'd rather someone who gets B's in their classes but publishes than someone who gets A's in their classes and doesn't publish. So it depends on what career, what field you're in. In my field, and most of the sciences, if you're not publishing, you're not going to get a job afterwards. And that's what we care about more. No one, after you get your PhD, no one's going to want to see your GPA. So your GPA matters for the undergrad to get into grad school. Once you're in grad school, if it's a terminal degree, then your GPA doesn't matter. You just need to pass. It's more about what you do while you're there. And actually, in that regard, somewhat same here. You want to have a high GPA, but you also want to do extracurricular stuff. You want to get research experience. You want to get experience presenting if you can. If you can publish as an undergraduate, it's rare, but that would look fantastic on your So those kinds of activities are going to be a lot stronger. If I know the person's lab, if I know, oh, he or she worked with this colleague of mine, then I know that they got good training. And that is a kind of a heuristic shortcut for me. I can just go, oh, okay, they must be good. If I get, and especially if that person wrote a letter of recommendation from my buddy at Vanderbilt, or whatever. Yeah.
How much variance is there across the disciplines of graduate schools, at MSU specifically? Like in terms of windows in rooms and culture and just expectations?
There's a lot of variance. It depends on the size of the department, so which is something you can look at. So you go on their website. If they don't have a page listing their current grad students, that's kind of a red flag. How much do they value their grad students if they don't even make it onto the web page of the department? Or do they have so many grad students that it's just too much to put on the web page? And then, where are the offices? There are some graduate programs that have some majors, departments that have more money than others. So some of the grads programs, almost all of their grad students are funded by grants. And they typically have more money for travel and stipends and all that stuff. Graduate programs, other graduate programs, all their graduate students are TAs, which usually doesn't have quite as much money for grants, but it would give them more freedom in terms of what projects they want to work on. So those are all, I would say there's a lot of variability across departments in that regard. You don't want, I wouldn't want to work in a lab where the faculty member had more than 4 grad students. How could they possibly give you any one-on-one mentoring experience if they have that many graduate students? Probably, if that's the case, you rarely would see that professor. Instead, they have a senior grad student who's going to be helping mentor you, or a postdoc who's going to mentor you. So, and it depends. There's also a lot of variability in grad programs. Some programs, like master's programs on campus, all you're doing is taking classes and maybe a small kind of thesis project. Other master's programs are a lot more hands-on and a lot more involved. And some of those ones that aren't very hands-on, they're just kind of mills where they're just pumping out students, and they're just taking your money and not necessarily giving you a lot of attention. So that's where it's best to talk to the current students. So when I accept a student, I always say, here's the emails of all my current students. And I encourage you to contact them to see what it's really like working with them. And I do that because I trust that they'll say good things. But if they didn't, that's their prerogative.